Sombun's presence brought a rush of emotions she thought she'd buried, and for the next 2 months, they were practically inseparable. It's true that during his 4-day disappearance, Sombun had actually been staying at a hotel, intentionally keeping his distance to have some alone time with the bodyguard. She found herself falling for him, especially since he checked all the boxes of what she'd hoped for in a man to replace Viroj. Hey there! Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a real-life story that's pretty shocking, and it all took place in Nonthaburi, Thailand. It's a bizarre yet true story about an older woman and her complicated love life, involving several younger men she was involved with. What happened in this case? Well, let's take a deeper look and see what it's all about. Before we jump into the story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to share this with your friends. Let's get the word out. So here's how the story goes. There's a man named Viroj who retired from the Department of Agriculture. He wasn't that old, but he'd been battling diabetes since 2014, so he decided to stay home. Meanwhile, his wife, Thanthip, was pretty active in politics. She'd been the board secretary of the Department of Social Affairs since 2015. Thanthip worked on building shelters for the homeless and was involved in orphanage development. She absolutely loved her job, often organizing fundraisers to help the poor and abandoned children. The couple had 3 children, all of whom were married. 2 of them lived in Samut Prakan, and they had 4 grandchildren. Financially, they were doing well. In January 2017, Thanthip joined the Nonthaburi Foundation Orphanage and formed a close working relationship with a man named Wichai, who handled the orphanage's needs. The 2 of them met up often to discuss things, usually with other staff members. At 56, Thanthip was still very active, beautiful, and full of life. Her straightforward way of speaking seemed to captivate everyone around her. Many men secretly admired her, not just because she was smart, but because she had this undeniable charm. Though she wasn't the head of the Nonthaburi Department of Social Affairs, she was the one who spent the most time in the field. People respected her for that. Some male officials even felt comfortable enough to chat with her for long periods of time when they saw her. That warm, inviting, touchy-feely vibe stuck with them, especially with Wichai, who enjoyed working with her. Then, on January 12, 2017, her husband Viroj casually reprimanded her. He had received a report that Thanthip had been meeting Wichai at a hotel called Jasmine. But here's the strange part. There were no other officials there, just Wichai. And this had happened 3 times. Thanthip got mad. Was her husband spying on her? She figured it must have been their driver Utona, who had been reporting back to him. Utona probably thought he knew what she was up to, but all he did was wait in the parking lot. He didn't even go inside the hotel. Thanthip was furious and threatened to fire him if he said anything else out of line. But Utona wasn't trying to cause trouble. He was just telling what he saw. He had noticed that, when Thanthip went to the hotel, there was only Wichai there, not any other officials from the Department of Social Affairs. Utona had been to the hotel often, so he knew the staff well. If he was wrong, he apologized, but he was just reporting what he saw. The conclusion that Viroj had drawn was that something was going on between his wife and Wichai. The next day, Thanthip decided to take matters into her own hands. She didn't want to be followed anymore, so she made the decision to go everywhere without a driver. She didn't like the idea of having someone watch her every move. After all, it wasn't unusual for officials to have meetings at hotels. Plenty of other places for that to happen too, like cafes or restaurants. Utona didn't need to come anymore. It was starting to feel like unnecessary drama. A week later, Thanthip fired the driver, even though her husband disagreed. Viroj didn't go out much anyway, only for his health check once a month. He could take a taxi or have one of their sons drive him around. So in Thanthip's eyes, firing Utona made sense. She didn't need a driver anymore. She needed her privacy. But her son and Viroj tried to talk her out of it. They felt bad for Utona, especially since he was 58 and would probably struggle to find another job. But Thanthip refused. She didn't want anyone in her personal space. Even though her husband told her to reconsider, she was set on her decision and was ready to face the consequences. So by early February 2017, things had taken a turn, and the man, Utona, quit working for Varoja's family. About a week later, Utona showed up at the Varoj household, but this time, he brought along a woman named Waranet, who turned out to be Witch-Eye's wife. Waranet had some serious accusations, telling Mr. Varoj that her husband had been having an affair with Thanthip. She came with evidence, screenshots of their chats, voice recordings, and even hotel receipts showing that Thanthip had paid for Witch-Eye's stays. Witch-Eye, realizing how deep the mess had gone, confessed and even resigned from the Panty development project, knowing his wife and family were beyond furious. Thanthip, feeling the weight of the situation, apologized to both her husband and Utona, admitting her mistake. The very next day, her health took a nosedive, and she ended up in Nonthaburi General Hospital. Varoj, desperate to keep things quiet, begged Utona and Waranet to keep the whole affair hush-hush. He even gave them a large sum of money to make sure no one found out. Everyone agreed to stay silent, mainly because it would ruin the family's reputation. Even after the scandal, Thanthip took a 2-month leave from work, claiming health issues. Back at her office, however, the whole thing flew under the radar. Thanthip returned to work, but her boss started to worry. Despite saying she was fine, she was still driving herself around, trying to catch up on all the tasks she had missed. Her boss, concerned for her well-being, decided to take action. He reassigned one of his bodyguards, a 31-year-old guy named Somboon, to look after Thanthip while she was out in the field. Somboon had an army background, was married with a 4-year-old son, and a beautiful wife named Kanchali, who was 7 years older than him. Somboon's job wasn't just to drive and escort Thanthip. He was also required to accompany her to her monthly medical checkups. Thanthip was well liked in her department for all the great work she'd done for the community. Many of her ideas had been successful, and during her 2-month leave, her absence left some confusion. Several projects had stalled because others preferred to deal with her directly. Plus, with Varoja's pension not stretching far enough to make ends meet, Thanthip's income was crucial for the family. So despite everything that had happened, they were okay with her going back to work, especially now that Somboon was on the job. But then, on July 10, 2017, just 2 months after Somboon started working with Thanthip, she went missing. She didn't come home for 4 days, and no one could reach her. Not her family, not her co-workers. Everyone was confused and angry, and her boss and husband were especially upset with Somboon. After all, it was his responsibility to keep track of Thanthip. But Somboon explained that on the night of July 6th, Thanthip had asked him to drop her off at the orphanage and then take the car back to his house, saying she'd take a taxi from there. After that, there was no word, and she disappeared without a trace. Naturally, this caused a lot of stress at home. Was she sick? Was she kidnapped? Or had something else happened? The authorities got involved and started the search on July 11th. Then, just when everyone was starting to lose hope, Thanthip called her husband and her boss in the afternoon. She explained that she was fine, just had some trouble with a friend in Samet Sakan, lost her phone, but had found it and was on her way home. She reassured everyone that she'd be back at work the next day, July 12th, and told Somboon to pick her up at home. The family couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I mean, when did Thanthip even have friends in Samet Sakan? She was from Nonthaburi, and most of her family, kids, grandkids, lived in Samet Prokan. And if she'd really lost her phone, why didn't she just remember the home number and call? Why wait days without any word? Naturally, everyone started wondering if Thanthip might be showing signs of Alzheimer's. Maybe her memory was slipping, which is why she couldn't explain herself clearly. Concerned, the family rushed her to Nonthaburi General Hospital, but the doctor reassured them. Thanthip was healthy, no signs of dementia, and mentally sound. She was fine. However, there was something else that struck her daughter as strange. When Thanthip came home, she was carrying some new clothes, but they seemed a little off, almost dreamy, like something a much younger person would wear. Thanthip claimed it was all she could buy since she'd left in a hurry, not bringing anything with her. The family's suspicions grew stronger, Alzheimer's seemed like a possible explanation, though it didn't fully add up since she was only 56 and the doctor had ruled it out. Fast forward 11 days after Xanthip returned to work, and things took another unexpected turn. Someone at the Social Affairs Department got a call from the police. They had some unsettling news. Xanthip hadn't been in Samet Sakan as she'd claimed. In fact, she had been in Nonthaburi the entire time she'd been missing. Her boss, alarmed, immediately called Somboon, telling him to get to the bottom of it. He should either ask Xanthip directly or go to the police station to figure out what was going on. Maybe Xanthip had been confused due to her memory loss, or maybe she was hiding something. But Somboon's response was simple. The problem is solved. Ms. Xanthip is fine, and she's back at home. Her boss wasn't satisfied with that though, and called Mr. Viroj to pass on the info from the police. It seemed like it didn't matter much in the grand scheme of things, but the boss wanted Viroj to be in the loop. Mr. Viroj, on the other hand, felt the need to visit the police station in person. He wanted to know what really happened, especially if his wife was struggling with a memory disorder. The police took him to a hotel where they met with the receptionist, Preacher. The receptionist revealed that, 2 weeks ago, on July 11th, she had seen a report about Xanthip's disappearance. But what puzzled her was that Xanthip had been staying at their hotel, not in Samet Sakan as claimed. She had checked in on July 7th, using her ID, and although she seemed healthy, she often wore a mask in the lobby. But things got even stranger. Preacher said that, on the third and fourth days of her stay, Xanthip got into a physical altercation with another woman at the restaurant and by the pool. The woman, upset, screamed that Xanthip was rotten and acting like a saint. Preacher went on to explain that Xanthip's bodyguard, a well-built man, had to step in, and she assumed it was her husband. Suddenly, everything clicked for Mr. Viroj. He pulled out his phone and showed Preacher a picture of Somboon. She immediately confirmed it was the same man. The CCTV footage from the hotel confirmed the rest. Xanthip had been hugging and holding Somboon in the hotel lobby. To make things even more complicated, the woman Xanthip had fought with turned out to be none other than Somboon's wife, Kancholi. That revelation hit Viroj like a ton of bricks, causing his chest to tighten with shock and betrayal. He was escorted back home by the police, but for the next 3 days, he was too stunned to speak. He felt utterly deceived, lied to, and manipulated. On Monday morning, he went straight to Xanthip's office to confront the head of the Social Affairs Department. They were both shocked by the news. The police were brought in, and Somboon and Xanthip were called in for questioning. Xanthip, though, stuck to her story. She claimed to have Alzheimer's and had forgotten everything. She kept denying any wrongdoing. Somboon did the same. This was the breaking point for Xanthip's family. Her husband, feeling like he couldn't trust her anymore, remained quiet. The whole thing was too painful to talk about. And the more he thought about it, the more betrayed he felt. Xanthip had lied, she had played him, and now he was left trying to figure out what to do next. For the next 2 days, Xanthip stayed at home, unsure of where to go. She couldn't go to work, and her kids weren't allowed to leave the house. But then, on the evening of July 28, 2017, everything took a dangerous turn. Robbers broke into the house through Xanthip's bedroom window. A masked man, armed with a gun, fired 2 shots at Mr. Viroj, demanding money. Despite being shot, Mr. Viroj fought back, pulling the man's mask off in the process. But it didn't end there. He was beaten senseless. Xanthip screamed, and Mr. Viroj was rushed to the hospital, where miraculously he survived. A month later, after he'd recovered, Mr. Viroj helped the police create sketches of the attackers. They soon arrested a 47-year-old man named Thaksin. After seeing him, Mr. Viroj confirmed that Thaksin was indeed one of the culprits. But the more the police investigated, the stranger the whole situation seemed. Xanthip had claimed the burglars broke in, but there were no signs of a break-in, no broken windows, no bent hinges, nothing. Even after injuring Mr. Viroj, the robbers hadn't stolen anything. It was as if someone had opened the window and let them in. The police questioned Thaksin aggressively, even threatening his family if he didn't talk. Finally, Thaksin confessed. He wasn't there to rob the house. He was there to kill Mr. Veroj on Thanthip's orders. Thaxin, a hunter with a collection of weapons, explained that he had met Thanthip while working on a reservoir project in 2016. They exchanged numbers, and just 2 days before the attack, she had contacted him. She paid him a large sum of money to take out her husband, and Thaxin was told to make it look like a robbery. He was promised he wouldn't go to jail because Thanthip had strong connections in the police. But it didn't work out that way. He was caught, and now he had to face the consequences. The evidence was clear, and Thanthip couldn't deny it. She admitted she had fallen out of love with her husband ever since he retired and started thinking about replacing him. And that's when she became infatuated with Somboon, her bodyguard. During their 2 months together, Thanthip and Somboon grew incredibly close, almost inseparable. In fact, during the 4 days she disappeared, Thanthip had deliberately stayed at a hotel with him. She wanted to be alone with him, away from everything. She had fallen in love with Somboon and thought he was the perfect replacement for Mr. Veroj. But there was a problem. Somboon's wife, Kanchali, had caught them together at the hotel. After that, everything started to fall apart. Despite Somboon returning home every night after staying with Thanthip, the situation was exposed. There were arguments at the hotel, and eventually, Kanchali threatened Thanthip with divorce and even physically confronted her. Thanthip chose to remain silent, but the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. Preacher, an insider at the hotel, reported the affair to the police, leading to the unraveling of Thanthip's plan. Somboon later admitted that Thanthip had instructed him to lie about taking her to the orphanage the night she disappeared. When the trial began, it became clear just how much Thanthip had betrayed her family. Wuranit and Utona, who had been involved in covering up the affair, showed up at the court, and it was a shocking moment for Mr. Veroj. Thanthip had admitted she no longer loved her husband, and Mr. Veroj was forced to expose her past actions. Her children were devastated to learn what their mother had done. The community, too, was in shock, questioning how the Department of Social Welfare had allowed Thanthip to work with them when her personal life was so chaotic. The department defended her, saying she had performed well for almost 3 years, but they couldn't have known what was happening behind the scenes. By December 28, 2017, the Nonthaburi City High Court found Thaxin guilty of assault and attempted murder. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Thanthip, the mastermind behind the attack, was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Somboon, who was unaware of the plan, faced no charges, as the court deemed his actions consensual. However, he was fired from his job and transferred to Samet Prokan with his wife and children. As for Mr. Veroj, despite everything that had happened, he chose not to divorce Thanthip at the request of his children. He continued to visit her regularly, though the pain of betrayal was still there. What lessons can we learn from this story?